Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The luncheon will start in about 5 minutes. At this time, we ask you to mute your electronic devices. Thank you.
Booster flight instrumentation.
Hydrogen burn-off system ignition.
We have main engine start. 4, 3, 2, 1. And liftoff.
Mantech's launch support and mission training teams are an integral part of every launch at Vandenberg Air Force Base and Kennedy Space Center. We provide crucial geospatial analysis and intelligence capabilities across the NGA enterprise and Department of Defense organizations. Mantech is at the forefront of mission training as we work with our customers on all aspects of manned spaceflight. Nearly half of our workforce is comprised of former military, and we're proud to be a major provider of healthcare IT to the Veterans Administration. Mantech is the leading innovator in the field of predictive analytics. We know what to fix before it breaks, and have developed a maintenance strategy that streamlines the supply chain and maximizes the combat capability for the warfighter. With our advanced analytic support to U.S. Customs and Border Protection, we help predict who and what will be crossing our borders and when to expect it. Mantech is widely recognized as the expert in advanced cyber. Our advanced offensive cyber capabilities are ever-changing and evolving. Mantech's partnership with the intelligence community provides a unique ability to deter foreign adversaries. Cutting-edge defensive cyber draws from our extensive experience in offensive cyber. The threat is very real, the enemy persistent, and you don't get a second chance. Our federal, civilian, and military training in both our advanced cyber range environment and the persistent cyber training environments help protect our nation through real-world scenarios running real-world live-fire cyber exercises. Drawing on our extensive knowledge of cyber, we're now securing autonomous aircraft control and sensor assemblies on a component and platform level, rendering the systems impervious to outside interference. Making the world Mantech secure.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's Keynote Luncheon. At the conclusion of the session, please provide feedback in the session survey located within the app. As we begin today's lunch, AFCEA and the U.S. Naval Institute would like to recognize the industry partners who have generously sustained this event as sponsors and exhibitors. Without their support, events like this cannot happen. Please consult the app or website for the full list and stop by their booths during the week and see the new technology and solutions they have to offer. This keynote lunch is sponsored by Mantech, who are represented today by Dan Dunaway, Navy Maritime Division Manager. Please join me in a round of applause for Mantech and for all of our patrons and sponsors. Now, please welcome to the stage Chaplain Stephen Schwartz, Deputy Command Chaplain, Naval Base Coronado, who will deliver today's invocation.
Let us pray. Almighty God, today we take the time to honor those who practice Semper Paratus. With readiness at the forefront of the mission, Coast Guard takes first-held means in American safety, security, and maritime stewardship with quick resolution. They take others' emergencies and make it theirs to resolve. May their minds resonate heritage and leadership that they have learned. May their words uphold truth and integrity in every situation. May their actions gleam with pride and tradition from the beginning to the end of each day. Lord, we ask that you bless our guardians with wisdom, discernment, truth, and clarity as they lead from the roots of what the Coast Guard began as to the adaptive force that they envision with hope. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
I would now like to call to the stage Kelly Welsh, U.S. Navy retired, Director of Business Development and Outreach at the U.S. Naval Institute, to recognize a group of enlisted superior performers. Please refer to the app for the full list of award winners and for more details.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is my privilege to join you here today to honor this year's enlisted superior performers. Each year at West, the U.S. Naval Institute and AFCEA International recognize the service, capabilities, and accomplishments of sailors, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen from local area commands. And today we actually have one out of area command. The recipients will receive a one-year gratis membership to the U.S. Naval Institute and AFCEA International. These sea service professionals were selected by their leadership for their outstanding service. They represent the talent across warfare communities, enlisted occupations, and specialties, serving globally and at the tip of the spear. They are professional, educated, aware, capable, and making a difference each and every day. This afternoon, we will recognize service members from Naval Information Warfare Center Pacific, Naval Medical Forces Pacific, Special Operations Command Central, Undersea Warfighting Development Center San Diego, U.S. Coast Guard Center San Diego, and Maritime Security Response Team West. At this point, I'd like to invite each parent command representative to the stage to help introduce and formally recognize their awardees. I ask that each awardee stand when your name is called and remain standing until all members of your parent command have been recognized. And at that point, I would ask the audience to applaud our awardees. Okay? So please join me on stage. Master Chief Lunye Richards will recognize awardees from Naval Information Warfare Center Pacific.
Good afternoon, everyone. Our first awardee is Staff Sergeant Fatima Altamirano Delgado. IT-1 Ian Campbell. YM-1 Gary Caulfield. ND-2 Christopher Coker. ET-1 Joshua Doherty. IT-1 Edward Flores. EM-2 Franklin Garcia. PS-2 Nicole Gagato. LS-1 Marquez Holmes. HM-2 Stephen Kampala. YM-1 Daniel Kernhop. ND-2 Jonathan Legg. OS-3 Austin Pierce. LS-1 Nicole Yacita. And Staff Sergeant Marissa Williams. Thank you.
Chief Harold Tran will recognize awardees from Naval Medical Forces Pacific.
Good afternoon. All right. On behalf of the Naval Medical Forces Pacific, I would like to thank the U.S. Naval Institute, AFCEA, and all the sponsors for hosting this event to recognize our well-deserved sailors. From 1st Dental Battalion, Naval Center, Camp Pendleton, H-1 Marshall, HM-3 Aniku. From NMRTC Camp Pendleton, HM-1 Ferguson. From NMRTC San Diego, HM-1 Harris and HM-2 Schubel. From Naval Medical Forces Pacific, HM-1 Clark and HM-2 Kapuli. Congratulations. Let's give these motivated sailors a round of applause.
Senior Master Sergeant Rudy Ortiz will recognize awardees from Special Operations Command Central.
Good afternoon, everyone. First, I'd like to recognize from SOCCENT J65, IT-1 Devin Terry, and IT-1 Dwayne Robinson. Thank you all.
Senior Chief Veronica Torres Silva will recognize awardees from Undersea Warfighting Development Center, San Diego.
Happy luncheon, everybody. I would like to recognize the following sailors from UWDC. IS-1 Dylan Mobile, YN-1 Eric Martinez, and IS-1 Mikeo Moore-Jones. These sailors are awesome. Congratulate them.
Master Chief Greg Vai will recognize awardees from Coast Guard Sector San Diego and Maritime Security Response Team West.
Thanks to West and AFC, keeping the best for last. All right, everyone knows this is as a Navy town, but it's the finest Coast Guard city here in San Diego. I'd like to recognize from Sector San Diego, YN-2 Emerson Barnes, SK-1 Justin Beal, OS-2 Pamela Chaburi, MK-2 Zachary Howell, AMT-2 Mariah Howell. From Marine Security Response Team West, ME-2 Stephen Heckley, GM-1 Mather Lovejoy, also from MSRT West. Thank you very much. Round of applause.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's just give our awardees one more round of applause for their contributions. Thank you.
Congratulations to all of our enlisted superior performers. Ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy your meal, and the program will begin shortly.
booster flight instrumentation.
Hydrogen burn-off system ignition.
We have main engine start. 4, 3, 2, 1. And liftoff.
Mantech's launch support and mission training teams are an integral part of every launch at Vandenberg Air Force Base and Kennedy Space Center. We provide crucial geospatial analysis and intelligence capabilities across the NGA enterprise and Department of Defense organizations. Mantech is at the forefront of mission training as we work with our customers on all aspects of manned spaceflight. Nearly half of our workforce is comprised of former military, and we're proud to be a major provider of healthcare IT to the Veterans Administration. Mantech is the leading innovator in the field of predictive analytics. We know what to fix before it breaks and have developed a maintenance strategy that streamlines the supply chain and maximizes the combat capability for the warfighter. With our advanced analytic support to U.S. Customs and Border Protection, we help predict who and what will be crossing our borders and when to expect it. Mantech is widely recognized as the expert in advanced cyber. Our advanced offensive cyber capabilities are ever-changing and evolving. Mantech's partnership with the intelligence community provides a unique ability to deter foreign adversaries. Cutting-edge defensive cyber draws from our extensive experience in offensive cyber. The threat is very real, the enemy persistent, and you don't get a second chance. Our federal, civilian, and military training in both our advanced cyber range environment and the persistent cyber training environments help protect our nation through real-world scenarios running real-world live-fire cyber exercises. Drawing on our extensive knowledge of cyber, we're now securing autonomous aircraft control and sensor assemblies on a component and platform level, rendering the systems impervious to outside interference. Making the world Mantech secure.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, please join me in welcoming to the stage Lieutenant General Susan Lawrence, U.S. Army retired, President and Chief Executive Officer, AFCEA International.
I did this for all you young ones over there. Got to get the older ones, motivated here. So, good afternoon. If you haven't finished lunch, please continue to enjoy it. We'd like to take a moment before we have our guest speaker come up in remembrance of Admiral Richard C. Mackey, a longtime supporter of AFCEA International and the Navy League. And he was a distinguished Pacific Theater Naval Flag Officer until he passed away on December 7th, 2022, Pearl Harbor Day. Admiral Mackey served on the AFCEA International Board of Directors, the Executive Committee for many years, as well as the Board of Directors for the AFCEA Educational Foundation. He was passionate about growing the leaders of tomorrow. AFCEA Hawaii recognizes his contributions with an annual Admiral Richard Mackey Scholarship that was established in 2010 that is awarded to the Hawaiian-based student who demonstrates the technical excellence in a hard science. Admiral Mackey will be missed by all who knew him and worked with him. We are grateful for his many years of dedication and sacrifice for the nation and his many contributions to AFCEA International and the Navy League. On a happier note, we would also like to recognize a member of the audience for his quick thinking and action. Chief Petty Officer Nicholas Cataldo, a Coast Guard Maritime Enforcement Specialist. He is also trained as an EMT and was in the right place at the right time this morning when an attendee collapsed, and he rendered first aid until the paramedics arrived. So on behalf of AFCEA International, we're going to give you a lifetime membership, as well as a membership to the United States Naval Institute. Thank you so much. Please stand. We are pleased to recognize Mantech as a sponsor of today's lunch. And at this time, I would like to invite Dan Dunaway, Navy Maritime Division Manager, to the stage to make a few remarks.
Thank you, General. I appreciate that introduction. Good afternoon. Welcome to the keynote lunch featuring Vice Admiral Tiongson, U.S. Coast Guard at West 2023. I'm Dan Dunaway, Vice President and Division Manager for Navy Maritime Engineering at Mantech, and we are proud to sponsor this lunch keynote. We'd like to thank AFCEA International and U.S. Naval Institute for hosting this outstanding event. And year in and year out, it generates great value for both our warfighter and our industry partners alike. Quick story, I am actually a Sea Services family. I have 5 kids, 4 boys, 1 girl. 2 oldest boys graduated from the Coast Guard Academy and are out there serving now. I've got my 4th son, who's a senior at South Carolina as a Navy ROTC, going surface nuke. So we're Sea Services through and through, and our dinner time conversations reflect that. Just after my oldest boys' commissionings, they were talking to me about the difference between Coast Guard and Navy, and I was all proud and pumping up the Coast Guard mission, and they said, yeah, it's pretty cool because we actually get to go do our job every day instead of just train for it. And I said, okay, a little misinformed, but okay. I'm okay with that. As you all know, this is a very challenging time for our nation as near-peer states test and monitor our capabilities across all domains. In yesterday's opening comments, the Assistant Commandant, General Smith, talked about the Marine Corps being the right now force. And it dawned on me that all the sea services have to have that same right now attitude respective to training and readiness, because right now is what is required. This sort of readiness, capability, and capacity will become increasingly vital in the months and years to come as near-peer adversaries divide up their game. Threats will come from conventional weaponry to next-generation warfighting capabilities like hypersonics, autonomous systems, directed energy, and cyber tools so sophisticated that it almost defies our imagination. For almost 55 years, Mantech has been a proud mission partner of the Sea Services, as well as all of DoD and the intelligence community. Our very first contract was an acoustics engineering contract for the U.S. Navy in 1968, and we're proud to say that we still do that work today. I know that Mantech is joined here by many other industry partners with the same passion for supporting the Sea Services in the missions that are critical to safeguarding national security. Thank you for having us. We're proud to be a sponsor, and without further delay, I'll turn it back over to General Lawrence.
That was great. Thanks very much. Thank you, Dan, and thanks to Mantech for their sponsorship of today's lunch. It is now my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker. Vice Admiral Andrew J. Tiongson assumed command of Coast Guard Pacific in the Alameda, California area on July 8, 2022. He serves as the operational commander responsible for all Coast Guard missions westward from the Rocky Mountains, across the Indo-Pacific, Arctic, and anti-Arctic regions, to the coast of Eastern Africa. That's a lot of area, sir. He concurrently serves as Commander, Defense Force West, and provides Coast Guard operational support to the Department of Defense and the combatant commanders. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Vice Admiral Tiongson.
I was still trying to digest that music that I just walked up here to. But I think we still have to wake up just a little bit, right? So I'll start right off by saying I'm a New England Patriots fan. You don't have to say anything bad about that or anything else. But what I was talking about is football. So something just happened and it just reminded me of this. So people here probably watched the Buffalo Bills in the Cincinnati Bengals game. And Damar Hamlin, is this ringing a bell? I see some heads going up and down. Damar Hamlin had a cardiac issue right there. And then all the commentators kept on talking about, if you're gonna have that bad thing happen to you, it's pretty good to have that happen in the middle of a football stadium with everybody there and the emergency folks ready to pounce and help you out. And he's doing really well. So I believe in that narrative, but I gotta tell you, it just changed for me today. So if you're in a conference and you're gonna have that kind of cardiac problem, you wanna be right next to the Coast Guard MSRT booth, because you got guys like Chief over here, Cataldo, who's gonna come and give you that first aid right away and potentially save your life. So Chief, back to you again. Thank you for being Semper Paratus and certainly showing what it means to be ready for people and to be there for them in their time of need. Thank you. All right, good afternoon, colleagues and distinguished guests. Thank you to Lieutenant General Susan Lawrence, Vice Admiral Pete Daly, Mr. Dan Dunaway, for the introductions and just for the ability to be here and talk with you today. A special thanks to, obviously, FCA and the Naval Institute. This is truly an honor for me. it was mentioned in there, I've been at my job now for about a little over 6 months. And in that time, I've come to fully realize the Coast Guard's unique value proposition as an instrument of national security. I feel this is especially true given the state-based threats and transnational challenges we face across the Indo-Pacific. I just returned from 2 weeks meeting with colleagues in Australia and New Zealand. What I heard there was the same as what our service chief hears around the world. There is an increasing demand everywhere, a demand for more Coast Guard. Why is this? A demand for more Coast Guard? Well, many Americans think of us as orange helicopters and small boats responding to domestic near-shore search and rescue cases. By the way, this is certainly a vital mission at the core of our humanitarian ethos. The U.S. Coast Guard is without doubt a global service operating on or around all 7 continents. We find ourselves around the world in large part because of our wide-ranging missions and broad authorities. The Coast Guard holds unique law enforcement, regulatory, military, and intelligence authorities. In addition to Title 10, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Title 10, we have authorities that come from Titles 14, 33, 46, and 50. This means that we are well positioned to serve as an interoperable military service and as a whole-of-government integrator. As an example of military interoperability, many here may appreciate that the U.S. Coast Guard cutters based in Bahrain have been patrolling the northern Arabian Gulf for nearly 20 years. Nearly 20 years as part of a joint and coalition forces maintaining stability in that critically strategic region. Around the world, the value proposition of the U.S. Coast Guard, what we contribute to national security, is maritime governance. We protect, we defend, we save those who live on and work on the water. We protect the sea itself, and we support the rule of law. We do not target specific actors. Rather, we target malign behaviors and activities. Around the world, Coast Guards and navies that share a common vision of a rules-based order, upholding the integrity of the maritime commons and respect for international law, all of them create an environment that resists efforts to undermine that same thing, that international order. This is all about teamwork and trust. Teamwork and trust. The Coast Guard Pacific Area's intent is to build trusted partnerships by being a good neighbor and seeing challenges and threats through the eyes of our partners. Today, I'd like to focus on the Coast Guard's posture in the Indo-Pacific. Thanks. I'm really proud of this photo right here. This is from one of my former shipmates, a lieutenant by the name of Freddie Hochschneider, the commanding officer of a Guam-based new fast response cutter. Building one-on-one trusted partnerships in Papua New Guinea along with his crew. Think about that for a second. This is a young lieutenant, not even 30 years old, sailing thousands of nautical miles of open ocean in a 154-foot cutter, enforcing international and other nations' laws and building connections across the Blue Pacific. This happens all of the time in our 14th district based in Honolulu. It's incredible, and it makes a difference. This operating area highlights that the fast response cutter, like Freddie's command, is an impressive platform with capabilities far beyond the old patrol boats that it just replaced. Within the Blue Pacific region, we have 6 of these types of cutters. But throughout my area of responsibility, with an expeditionary logistics model centered around a concept that I refer to as places, not bases, my district commanders are able to employ these cutters in innovative ways, pushing them into the remote corners of their operating areas. I bring up these tactical examples to highlight a couple of higher level points. First, the U.S. Coast Guard is a key component of the White House's Indo-Pacific strategy, which specifically calls out the Coast Guard, our role in advising, training, and helping enhance partner nations' capacity. Modeling professional maritime behaviors across the region is exactly what I trust people like Lieutenant Hofschneider to do each and every day. Second, this is not a new thing for the United States Coast Guard. We have been working to help the Indo-Pacific be free and open, connected, prosperous, secure, and resilient for many, many years. And we intend to contribute to do this for many more years to come. You can trace our service routes in the region back to the revenue cutter Lawrence, whose first calling on Hilo, Hawaii 172 years ago. The Coast Guard's credibility is backed by our persistent presence. While recent U.S. strategies emphasize the Indo-Pacific's prominent role in national security, the Coast Guard is not conducting any new missions. We're simply doing more of them in the region and seeking to complete our missions in new and better ways. I ask my team to focus on relentless incrementalism, accumulating small acts of progress into substantial strategic gains for our nation and, frankly, for the world. While this is all founded in presence, I probably don't need to remind you that the Coast Guard is a small service. We're often compared to the size of the New York City Police Department. We often navigate resource-constrained environments, so it's a big deal for us when we move people or hardware around the world. This year, we have tripled the number of national security cutter deployments into the Western Pacific, like the current one that the Coast Guard Cutter Kimball is deployed with 7th Fleet, working with the Japan Coast Guard. At the same time, we expanded the reach of our smaller cutters, like these fast response cutters, across the Blue Pacific, with more effective expeditionary logistics and creative force packaging. In a recent example, one of these Guam-based fast response cutters, the cutter Oliver Henry, called on Cairns, Australia, as part of an extended Micronesia patrol, building partnerships and assisting others with fisheries enforcement the entire time. I'm excited to tell you that the Coast Guard is increasing presence in other ways as well. The first Indo-Pacific support cutter, a 270-foot medium endurance cutter previously based on the east coast of the United States, is scheduled to begin operating in the Pacific in calendar year 2024. This cutter will remain in the Pacific and will build upon the many decades of enduring presence, operating in concert with the needs of our allies and our partners. As our Commandant Admiral Linda Fagan recently stated, a free and open Indo-Pacific requires partners who promote maritime governance. And while the Indo-Pacific Support Cutter will expand presence, it's not only about our ships. It's about our people, too. We have attachés in Japan, South Korea, China, Singapore, Australia, and Russia, advisors in Vietnam, the Philippines, and Fiji, and vessel inspectors in Japan and Singapore. And we are expanding these types of individuals and teams throughout the regions. So additional attachés and other liaison officers soon. This thought of maritime governance arising from like-minded partners upholding a common vision is clear to me when I just look at this huge chart that's in my office. The Lieutenant General mentioned it earlier. The U.S. Coast Guard Pacific area encompasses over 74 million square miles of ocean, From the west coast of the United States to the Horn of Africa, you went over this, the pole to pole. I always like to refer to it best as from polar bears to penguins, from Hollywood to Bollywood, and a little more. That's where we go. It becomes obvious that no one country, when you look at this chart, no one country can address a global threat, and trusted partners are essential to combating these threats. Threats like illegal, unreported, and unregulated, or IUU, fishing. By the way, over 90% of the world's major fish stocks are classified as fully exploited, overexploited, or significantly depleted. This has a huge impact across Oceania. It also affects the entirety of the vast Pacific, our shared neighborhood. In fact, many of our partners consider this issue to be nearly existential. Think of it in terms of food security. Think of it in terms of economic security. I am also reminded of the transnational challenge posed by rising seas and severe storms, something many leaders across the Pacific Island Forum describe exactly in existential terms. On this slide, you see a crew member from the Coast Guard cutter Juniper delivering potable water and relief supplies to the drought-stricken island of Kiribati last summer. Our cutter was able to do this because of our persistent presence that I just spoke about and our habitual alignment with the needs of our regional partners. Listen to this quote. "You are here when we need you most. You are here when we need you most." These are the words of President David Penuelo of the Federated States of Micronesia, speaking recently to our 06, our captain, commanding officer of Coast Guard Forces Micronesia, which is based in Guam. I find this statement to be extremely profound and rewarding. Your Coast Guard is making a difference in the region through a relentless incrementalism approach at the speed of our partner nations. Coast Guard missions and the scale of our service closely align with what our partners often seek in their own efforts to make the maritime commons safer, more secure, and more prosperous. They look for exchanges of ideas concerning such things as search and rescue, illegal drug interdiction, enforcement to protect vital protein sources provided by their fisheries, systems to manage contingency preparedness and disaster recovery, and pollution response. I hope these sound familiar to everyone because these are United States Coast Guard missions. This is what we do. In just one deployment after the Rim of the Pacific exercise last summer, the Hawaii-based National Security Cutter Midget conducted firefighting and counter-piracy exercises with the Indian Coast Guard, small boat and law enforcement exercises with the Philippine Coast Guard, search and rescue and communications exercises with Singapore's Maritime Agency, and personnel exchanges and capability demonstrations with the Maldives Coast Guard. Our advisors, resident trainers, and mobile training teams focus on capacity building. For example, supporting the expansion of the Philippine and Vietnam Coast Guards. It's not just about steel on target. Our innovative small teams of Coast Guardsmen in the field have a huge impact in the region. Building legal fishery frameworks, sharing knowledge and expertise in search and rescue, marine safety, environmental protection, emergency management, maritime domain awareness, and cyber protection. Talk about a return on investment. Those are teams of 3 to 5 people making a difference each and every day. But in each of these engagements, the needs of our partners take the lead role. And the U.S. Coast Guard meets them where they were with what they needed, always seeing the challenges and threats through their eyes. So my last section here, I'm going to pivot from building trusted partnerships to how they allow the Coast Guard to uphold the rule of law across the Indo-Pacific or across the Pacific in general. I know it's a little cliche to say that a rising tide lifts all boats. But I believe it. I believe it. Good maritime governance begets adherence to rules-based order, which begets maritime security. The United States enjoys 11 bilateral law enforcement agreements with Pacific Island countries. For us, these are force multipliers. These bilateral law enforcement agreements, often called shipwrighter programs, involve vessels jointly crewed by specially trained and designated United States Coast Guard law enforcement officers and another nation's officers who are authorized to enforce the law on both sides of an international boundary line. Working together, we're able to transit back and forth across these borders to help address threats to national security, preventing cross-border smuggling and trafficking, including countering IUU fishing. As an example from last year, the National Security Cutter Stratton did exactly this with the Fijian Maritime Forces. They patrolled in and around the Fiji's exclusive economic zone. And today, as I speak to you, we have 2 other cutters that are out there right now performing this mission. Also, we recently signed a new bilateral agreement with the Federated States of Micronesia, with enhanced provisions to conduct fisheries enforcement on its behalf without having one of their local officials on board our cutters. Think about that for a second. That means there's a U.S. cutter that can go into their sovereign seas, call them on the radio and say, we think someone's up to no good, can we go ahead and do a boarding? And they say yes, and we can do it, just like that. Partnerships built upon trust. This model agreement serves as an example for others. And one thing for sure is this model agreement has proven to me that we are a trusted partner with FSM. Nuanced problems require nuanced solutions, and niche missions and niche authorities are the bedrock of the Coast Guard's unique contributions to national security. This slide right here reminds me of this. The junior officer that you see here is from my staff. She is holding the pennant of the South Pacific Regional Fisheries Management Organization. That's a mouthful. South Pacific Regional Fisheries Management Organization, also known as SPRFMO. Last summer, yeah, right, SPRFMO. Last summer, the National Security Cutter James conducted a truly innovative law enforcement patrol. This was done in the Eastern Pacific near the Ecuadorian Galapagos Islands, a region that a lot of us know is it's known for illicit drug smuggling. But James was conducting non-flag state fisheries enforcement under the auspices of this multilateral SPRFMO. We were upholding their agreements, of which several nations signed up to. We were checking for regulation compliance in this seasonal distant water fishing fleet that's basically targeting squid. Most of the vessels in this fleet, guess where they come from? They have origins in East Asia. Please think China. Also think about the fleet. When I say fleet, what does that mean? This is like 350 to 500 fishing vessels, all in someone else's sovereign waters. Think about that for a second. When James attempted to conduct a compliance boarding on the Panamanian flagged and Hong Kong owned and operated transshipment vessel, the Young Hang 3, the vessel maneuvered erratically and dangerously to prevent the boarding team from coming aboard. What happened next was the most law enforcement impact I've ever seen from a non-boarding, from a boarding that never happened. They never got on board this vessel. But what we did have was good information and sharing it back to the SPRFMO, who shared it with the countries that are involved there, as well as the flag state of Panama And what happened was Panama levied a $300,000 fine on the owners of the Yonghang 3, then proceeded to deflag the vessel. For those of us who are associated with the maritime world, that's a big thing. They deflagged that vessel, but then proceeded to deflag 31 others that were associated with this illicit activity, all within this distant water fleet. Then the U.S. Department of Treasury levied sanctions against 2 major Chinese fishing companies and 8 subsidiaries. This impacted 157 PRC-flagged vessels, all with connections to illicit fishing. Then Panama ordered its entire fishing fleet not to operate with any entities that are tied to these organizations. Folks, I have been involved in this business for some time. This is simply incredible. We talk about integrated deterrence. There's a non-government organization involved with this. There's other nation states involved in this. There are partnerships with NOAA. There are partnerships with the U.S. Coast Guard here. We're talking to Southcom the entire time. This might be a good example of that and how you can get after these types of threats and challenges as we talk about gray zone activities. This effective, a lot of folks refer to that as integrated deterrence. I like to talk about it in terms of strategic leadership. The networks and communication, often at surprisingly junior levels inside the United States Coast Guard with our interagency and international partners. This, again, this effective information sharing and collective action is at the heart of what we all call good maritime governance. Upholding the rule of law addresses existential threats for many of our partners, and it preserves the way of life that we all enjoy. The Coast Guard's long-standing and increasing presence in the Indo-Pacific, along with our ability to respond to the needs of our allies and partners, is unique in the United States government. The United States Coast Guard Pacific area is dedicated to this common effort, and we will continue to get after these complex challenges. Key to success will be our vital partnerships. I assure you that we are in this fight for the long haul. I'm thrilled to be part of the team helping our nation and others keep the Indo-Pacific free and open, connected, prosperous, secure, and resilient. Thank you for the opportunity to share our efforts in the Indo-Pacific, a region that will have the utmost consequence in the world and to everyday Americans. I look forward to continuing this conversation and taking your questions. God bless, and Semper Paratus. I have absolutely nobody in line.
Oh, yes, you do.
Uh-oh, Sergeant Major, he's got a couple, you got a comment, right?
A comment and a question.
Comment and a question. Okay.
Thank you, sir. First of all, I would like to encourage everyone here to pick up a book called Hero Found. It's about a flyer from the United States Navy who was shot down in 1966 over Laos. A tremendous book about camaraderie. For the Coast Guard, I would like everybody here to buy a DVD or watch a DVD called Finest Hour. That way you're going to get a more definite indication of what the Coast Guard actually does 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 360 days a year, or 5. That being said, I would like to thank the Admiral for inviting me here today. My challenge for the Admiral, my point for the Admiral is 2 points. Number one, with your worldwide emphasis on the Coast Guard being there, you're wearing your membership out. I have a problem with retention. You need more coasties. in order to accomplish this mission with the size you have right now and the commitments that are placed upon you? That's my first question. My second part of that, if you decide you'd like to move to the second part, is autonomous shipping. No one on that ship and boarding it for an inspection or saving it while it's out in the seas. That is the autonomous question I have for you. If you would address that one for me, please.
All right, thank you very much. I don't know about the first question. I thought that was like a commercial for, hey, we need people to join the Coast Guard. Let's get out there and do it.
That's exactly the point.
Excellent.
We need about 2,000 more coasties.
Yeah, Sergeant Major, you're right. You're right on. That is absolutely correct. We need to get after that in the Coast Guard. That is our Commandant's top priority. I think it's not unique to the Coast Guard. I think all of the services are kind of wrestling with this right now. I heard yesterday say that the Marine Corps, somebody in the Marine Corps said they met their recruiting goals and challenges. We are not quite there yet. We are lagging behind, but we do need more people to come and say, hey, I want to suit up and I want to get after these things. I want to be part of that team. The other thing you had is autonomous vessels, right? Yes, autonomous vessels are still fairly new. I saw one just out here on the floor today. When I was a district commander, I used to look out my office and watch an autonomous vessel being tested in that local region. I think for the most part, those are very challenging. They're challenging from a regulatory perspective in our homeland missions here in terms of autonomous vessels, but using those types of autonomous vessels out in the regions that I patrol and things like that, I am fully game to try to do those things. In fact, just before I came in here, I was talking to the president of NPS, who's talking with our R&D folks about how can we get, I mentioned it in the speech, how can we get better at the things that we do? Because I don't have unlimited vessels. I need some help. I need to get innovative in trying to get after it. If that is a way to get after some of these threats, if that's a way to monitor an EEZ, an exclusive economic zone of another partner nation, and provide information to human beings that can help do a law enforcement action, I'm fully open to it. I like to test it. I like to try it out.
My point is, is that Iran captured one of these autonomous vessels owned by the United States Navy. And the issue went like this. They started towing it towards Iran, and before the Navy actually understood what was going on, for the United States Navy to go out and retrieve that vessel on the high seas at that time. They just captured it and started towing it towards Iran.
All right, thank you. I haven't come across those just yet.
All right, thank you.
Sir.
Kai Alberg, Washington State. You mentioned the fleets of hundreds of Chinese fishing vessels that sometimes go where they shouldn't. I'd like you to address the Chinese maritime militia. I understand those boats are often armed. They're under the People's Liberation Army. What would you say is their legal status, and what are the rules of engagement? I mean, can we board them if they are in somebody's territorial waters or where they're not supposed to be? How do we best support our allies in confronting the threat that these vessels sometimes pose?
Yeah, that's a great question. I want to point out, though, during my remarks when I said we don't target any individual nation. We target that malign activity, that malign behavior. Turns out that one example I gave, that is a PRC distant water fleet, right? That comes over there and does what they were doing to Ecuador. I also usually talk to folks about, the other group that we do a lot of boardings on is China Taipei. So again, stressing that we're after the malign activity because our goal here is to be that trusted partner and help that partner out as they want to be helped. So it could be anybody who's doing that malign activity. The issue you brought up about the militia vessels, this is that, when people talk about things that keep you up at night, this is one of those things that keeps me up at night. What is our Coast Guard boarding officer, what are our Coast Guard cutters going to do if they come across one of these vessels? We do have standing TTP that addresses that type of issue. But I don't want to be there in the middle of starting something that the 7th Fleet has to probably finish or something like that. So our guys we're not going to be involved too much with that type of thing. What we are going to do is talk about the unprofessional behavior. We're going to use that in the information space. And we're going to let everybody know that this is what's going on in regions that they probably shouldn't have been in to begin with. So going ahead to amplify those messages of who are these malign actors and what is the malign activity that they're involved in, and to get that out as best we can. But with other types of, so for example, with the Philippine Coast Guard, we're training different types of TTP to address that particular issue. That's all I'm going to say on that right here. But that is something that I think of often. So I appreciate your question. Thank you. Sir.
Sir, I'd like to stay in Ecuador and the law enforcement activity there. You spoke about NGOs collaborating, partnering with the Coast Guard. Could you expand a little bit more on that and identify the NGOs, please?
Well, there's a whole host of NGOs that we work with day in and day out. A lot of times we work very closely with them in terms of emergency response and those type of activities. We also work with them in terms of fisheries. So we are active in that space. And frankly, we have to be. I put that in part of being or having integrated strategic partnerships. So we have to be able to understand what the NGOs are doing. Maybe they can amplify what we're doing. Maybe they can help us in that information or operations in the information environment. Maybe they can help steer us in the right directions. We're always open to learn from anybody who has like-minded type of thoughts and behaviors. So I can't list a whole laundry list of them. There are tons of them across the entire AOR. But we're willing to open up and talk and try to get after the same things together, side by side. I don't know if that answers your question, but in general, that's what we are.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Admiral Paul Rospold from Systems Planning and Analysis. in your operations out further in the Indo-Pacific, away from the west coast of the United States, could you talk about the command and control lash-up you have with U.S. Navy? Are your cutters in Geeks M or Geeks J? Are you hooked up with the MOC? How does all that work?
Yeah, so interesting enough, when we do deploy out into the Western Pacific, a lot of times we put them under they end up under the tactical control of 7th Fleet. And 7th Fleet does a lot of things to make sure that we can have interoperable pieces. So for example, the Midget, when they went out there last, I gave that example of the Coast Guard cutter Midget, did all of that stuff. They had Link 16 installed on board to go ahead and do that. It's not organic to us. My push is to try to get more of those types of communication systems like you were just talking about in order to ensure that interoperability the second the lines come off. But we know of these deployments in enough time, and the Navy has been very helpful to us in ensuring this interoperable piece. And from all the signs that I get, Carl will tell me, I get great feedback on what those Coast Guard cutters are doing out and about under his tactical control.
All right, thank you.
And we have time for one more question.
Sir, when you think back about the U.S. military, especially in the last 20 years, there was a huge component of it that was using and leveraging the strengths and so forth of Guard and Reserve organizations. Without going on the record or anything else, do you think the Coast Guard needs a larger, and is it growing a reserve capability to do the sort of same things as your missions seem to be growing and expanding?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that question. We have In our reserve component, we have fallen down a little bit. I would offer that our same issue that we're having with the active duty force in terms of recruitment is true also for the reserve. So we need to get after that. Again, the Commandant that's one of her top, if not her top priority, to get after that, to access people into our service, whether it's reserve or active duty, but to have people suited up and ready to go. So do we need more? The answer in my mind is absolutely. We should get up there a little bit more. We should restore to where we were authorized to have in our reserve force, something that we haven't achieved in a few years at this point. So yes, absolutely. And I'll put a plug in for domestically, one of the arms that really helps us out is the volunteer force that we have known as the Coast Guard Auxiliary. So they are a massive force multiplier for us when it comes to recreational boating safety just here, like within the harbor here. So we've got a lot of different types of ways to get Coast Guard men and women to be active in getting after things. Those are 3 of them right there. So absolutely, and thanks for that question. But I really appreciate that, because when I think of the reserves, I often think of large destructive hurricane systems and things like that, of which the reserves for us, especially here domestically, play a huge role in doing that. All right, thank you for your questions, folks. Thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome General Lawrence back to the stage.
Thank you so much, sir, for the time you've given us and the insights. It was absolutely fascinating. On behalf of the U.S. Naval Institute and FC International, we'd like to give you Mastering the Art of Command by Trent Hone. And again, thank you so very much. And I learned a tremendous amount. We appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you all for attending today's lunch. We're now moving into a dessert break in the exhibit hall. This afternoon, beginning at 2:30, there is one more panel session for today. How are we enabling our information policies, systems, processes, and warfighters to ensure decision superiority? That panel is sponsored by Appian. The theaters will be busy again this afternoon, several sessions held in each one of them. Consult your app for details. At 4 p.m., the Women in AFCEA Appreciation event will begin here in Hall D with a light networking reception, followed by a keynote from Vice Admiral Kelly Oshbach, and will culminate with the presentation of the AFCEA Women's Appreciation Awards. We encourage everyone to attend, both men and women.